The attorney's conference room fell silent except for the rustling of paper. My brother Marcus stood at the head of the mahogany table, looking like he'd already moved into Dad's corner office. Mom sat beside him, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. My aunt and uncle flanked them like bookends of family solidarity. I sat alone at the far end of the table. As I was saying, Marcus continued, adjusting his Rolex, the will clearly states that the successful child inherits the family construction business and all associated real estate holdings. That would be me. Sarah can have Dad's old fishing gear or whatever. Polite laughter rippled around the table. Mr. Peterson, Dad's estate attorney, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He'd been Dad's lawyer for 30 years, but he kept glancing at the woman sitting beside him. Someone I'd brought. Someone Marcus hadn't expected. Marcus, Mr. Peterson said carefully, perhaps we should review the complete estate documentation before. No need, Marcus interrupted. It's all very straightforward. Dad built Henderson Construction from nothing. 42 employees, $8.3 million in annual revenue, 6 commercial properties in downtown Phoenix. He always said it would go to the child who proved themselves worthy. He looked directly at me. The child who actually stayed in the industry. Not the one who ran off to play consultant. Mom nodded. Your father was very clear about his wishes, Sarah. Marcus has been running the company for 5 years. He's earned this. I took a sip of water and said nothing. My Uncle Richard cleared his throat. It's not personal, Sarah. It's just, well, you left the business. You left the family, really. This is about legacy. Exactly, Marcus said. I've sacrificed everything for Henderson Construction. I work 60-hour weeks. I've grown the business by 30%. I've proven myself. What have you done? Consulting. He said it like a dirty word. Working from your laptop at coffee shops? That's not a real career. Aunt Linda added, and you never visit. You missed the last 3 Thanksgivings. Your father noticed these things. I smiled politely. I was busy building something. Building what? Marcus laughed. PowerPoint presentations? More laughter. Even Mr. Peterson looked uncomfortable on my behalf. If we could please proceed with the formal reading, Mr. Peterson began. By all means, Marcus said, settling into his chair like a king on a throne. Let's make it official. I need to go back 7 years to explain how we got here. Dad started Henderson Construction in 1989 when I was 3 years old. By the time I was old enough to understand, the company was the family religion. Sunday dinners weren't about family, they were about bids, contracts, and profit margins. Every conversation eventually circled back to the business. Marcus, 6 years older than me, embraced it completely. He studied construction management at Arizona State, interned with Dad every summer, and joined the company full-time at 22. He was the golden child, the heir apparent, the son who understood legacy. I went a different direction. I studied business analytics and information systems. I was fascinated by operational efficiency, supply chain optimization, and data-driven decision-making. Dad called it playing with spreadsheets. Marcus called it office work for people who can't handle real jobs. But I loved it. I saw patterns where others saw chaos. I could look at a company's operational data and identify inefficiencies worth millions. After college, I joined Henderson Construction as an operations analyst. I thought I could help modernize the business, bring data-driven insights to bidding and project management. I created models that could predict project overruns with 87% accuracy. I identified supply chain inefficiencies costing the company $340,000 annually. Dad patted me on the head and ignored every recommendation. Marcus was worse. This isn't a tech startup, Sarah. This is construction. We do things the way they've always been done. At family dinners, he'd mock my little spreadsheets and cute pie charts. Mom would laugh. Dad would change the subject to Marcus's latest successful project. I realized I was never going to be heard, never going to be respected, never going to be anything more than the daughter who doesn't understand real work. So at 26 I left. I started my own consulting firm, Henderson Analytics LLC. I specialized in operational efficiency for mid-sized construction and manufacturing companies. My first client was a $12 million construction firm in Tempe that was bleeding cash. Within 6 months, I'd helped them restructure their supply chain and project management systems. They saved $1.8 million in the first year. Word spread. Within 2 years, I had 17 clients across Arizona, Nevada, and California. My firm grew to 8 employees. By year 3, we were generating $2.4 million in annual revenue. By year 4, we hit $5.1 million. I didn't tell my family any of this. What was the point? They'd already decided who I was. The daughter who couldn't hack it in real business. But here's what they didn't know. In year 3 of running Henderson Analytics, I was approached by a private equity firm called Meridian Capital Partners. They'd been watching my work and wanted to discuss something unusual. We're building a portfolio of mid-sized construction and manufacturing consulting firms, the managing partner told me over lunch in Scottsdale. Companies like yours that have proven operational excellence and strong client retention. We're offering acquisition with retained leadership and significant equity participation. They offered me $8.2 million for Henderson Analytics, with the condition that I stay on as CEO and take a 23% equity stake in the new holding company they were creating, Meridian Operational Group. I said yes. Over the next 3 years, Meridian acquired 11 similar firms. We became a $140 million consulting powerhouse with 240 employees across 8 states. My equity stake was now worth approximately $32 million. But that wasn't even the interesting part. The interesting part was Dad. In 2019, Dad's health started declining. He had a series of small strokes that left him mentally sharp but physically weakened. He knew he needed to start thinking about succession, but he had a problem. He didn't actually trust Marcus. Dad wasn't stupid. He knew Marcus was flashy, ambitious, and often reckless. He'd watched Marcus take increasingly risky bids, cut corners on safety protocols, and treat employees like disposable resources. The 30% growth Marcus bragged about? It came from aggressive expansion that Dad privately worried was unsustainable. One Tuesday afternoon, Dad called me. Not Marcus. Me. Sarah, I need to talk to you about something important. Can you come to the house? I drove to Scottsdale expecting another lecture about family loyalty. Instead, Dad said, I'm worried about the business. For 2 hours, he laid out his concerns. Marcus was overextended. He'd taken on 3 major projects simultaneously without adequate project management. He was burning through cash reserves. He'd alienated 2 of their best project managers who'd quietly resigned. But here's the thing, Dad said. If I try to rein him in, he'll think I don't trust him. He'll rebel. And your mother will take his side. He looked at me carefully. I need someone smart watching the money. Someone Marcus won't see coming. What are you asking me? I'm asking if you'd be willing to become the majority silent owner of Henderson Construction. I stared at him. What? I'll transfer 81% of the company to you through an irrevocable trust. Marcus will continue running day-to-day operations, but you'll have controlling interest. You'll appoint 3 board members. You'll have final approval on any decision over $500,000. You'll protect the company I built. Why me? Because you're the only one who won't destroy it for ego, Dad said simply. Marcus needs to feel like he's in charge. But someone needs to actually be in charge. Someone who understands numbers and long-term thinking. Mom will never forgive you. Your mother doesn't need to know. The transfer will be private. Marcus will think he's inheriting everything when I die. By the time he finds out the truth, the structure will be ironclad. I thought about it for exactly 48 hours. Then I said yes. In September 2019, Dad transferred 81% controlling interest in Henderson Construction to the Sarah Henderson Trust. I appointed 3 board members. Myself, Dad's most trusted project manager Frank Rodriguez, and a retired construction executive named Patricia Chin who Dad respected enormously. Marcus never knew. For the next 4 years, I quietly protected the company. When Marcus wanted to take a disastrous $4.2 million bid on a project with impossible timelines, the board rejected it. When he tried to cut employee health benefits to boost short-term profits, the board blocked him. When he wanted to fire Frank Rodriguez for insubordination, the board said no. Marcus blamed Dad for the board's interference. He thought the 3-person board was just Dad's way of maintaining control. He had no idea I was chairman. And here's the other thing Marcus didn't know. Dad died on March 3rd of a massive stroke. He was 71 years old. The funeral was massive. 240 people, half of them business associates. Marcus gave a moving eulogy about carrying on Dad's legacy. Mom sobbed in the front row. I sat quietly in the third row, holding my husband David's hand. At the reception, Marcus cornered me near the catering table. I assume you'll want to sell your Henderson Analytics firm now and come back to work for me, he said. It wasn't a question. I'm happy with my current work, Marcus. Right. Your consulting thing. He sipped his drink. Well, I'll be honest, Dad left the business to me. I'll be making some significant changes. Expansion. Modernization. Taking risks he was too old to take. The board might have thoughts about that. His jaw tightened. The board is Dad's old guard. I'll be replacing them within the year. Frank Rodriguez is practically retired anyway. Patricia Chin doesn't understand modern construction. Once the estate is settled and everything's officially mine, I'm cleaning house. Interesting. Don't take it personally, Sarah. You made your choice when you left. This is my time now. I smiled politely and excused myself. That night, I called my estate attorney, Jennifer Walsh, who also happened to be one of the partners at the firm handling Dad's probate. Jennifer, Marcus is going to be surprised at the will reading. Very surprised. I need you to prepare something else for me. What do you need? I need a complete forensic accounting review of Henderson Construction's finances for the past 4 years. Every transaction over $10,000. Every expense report Marcus submitted. Every vendor payment. Everything. You think he's been stealing? I think he's been reckless. But I'd like to know exactly how reckless. Jennifer called me back 3 weeks later. Sarah, you need to see this in person. The forensic accounting report was 174 pages long. Jennifer spread the key findings across her conference table. Your brother has been systematically embezzling from Henderson Construction for 4 years. She walked me through it. $127,000 in fraudulent vendor payments to a shell company. Marcus controlled $89,000 in personal expenses charged to the business. His boat, country club memberships, his daughter's private school tuition. $52,000 in kickbacks from subcontractors in exchange for contract awards. $94,000 in consulting fees, paid to Marcus's wife's company for services never rendered. Total, $362,000 in provable theft. But here's the bigger problem, Jennifer continued. Your brother has been cooking the books to hide losses from bad projects. That 30% growth he claims? Mostly fiction. The company's actual profitability has declined 18% over 4 years. He's been using cash reserves to cover operating losses while reporting phantom profits. How bad is it? If he continues current trajectory, Henderson Construction will be insolvent within 18 months. He's burned through $2.3 million in cash reserves your father spent 40 years building. I sat back in my chair. He's destroying everything Dad built. Yes. And when the will reading happens and he discovers you own 81%, he's going to fight you. Be prepared for war. I thought about that for a long moment. Then I made a decision. I called Patricia Chin and Frank Rodriguez. We held an emergency board meeting. We have evidence of significant financial misconduct, I told them. Marcus has been embezzling and mismanaging the company into the ground. The will reading is in 2 weeks. When Marcus discovers the ownership structure, he's going to explode. We need to be ready. We voted unanimously. The board would attend the will reading. We would bring the forensic accounting report. And we would be prepared to terminate Marcus's employment immediately if he reacted with hostility. Frank Rodriguez, who'd worked with Dad since 1991, looked at me with something like relief. Your father knew, didn't he? That's why he did this. Yes. He knew Marcus needed oversight. He just didn't predict Marcus would go this far. Patricia Chin added, your father would be proud of how you've handled this, Sarah. 2 weeks later, I walked into Mr. Peterson's conference room with Jennifer Walsh and our forensic accountant, Robert Kim. Marcus was already there holding court. And that's when he made his declaration about Dad's will, leaving everything to the successful child. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat for the 3rd time. Marcus, if I could please have your attention, I'd like to proceed with the complete estate review. Complete estate review? Marcus said. What's to review? Dad's will is clear. I inherit Henderson Construction and the associated properties. Sarah gets the personal effects. Mom gets the life insurance in the Scottsdale house. It's straightforward. Actually, Mr. Peterson said carefully, the situation is more complex than you're aware. Marcus frowned. What do you mean complex? Mr. Peterson opened a leather folder. Your father's will does indeed address the distribution of his personal assets. However, Henderson Construction is not part of the probate estate. The room went very still. What? Marcus said. Henderson Construction was transferred out of your father's ownership in 2019 via irrevocable trust. He no longer owned the company at the time of his death. Therefore, it's not subject to inheritance through his will. Marcus's face turned red. That's impossible. I've been running that company for 5 years. If Dad transferred it, he would have transferred it to me. He transferred it to someone else. Who? Mr. Peterson looked at me. Every eye in the room turned toward me. I met Marcus's stare evenly and said nothing. No, Marcus said. Absolutely not. There's no way Dad gave the company to her. She abandoned the family business. She quit. She doesn't even work in construction anymore. Nevertheless, Mr. Peterson said, in September 2019, your father transferred 81% controlling interest in Henderson Construction to the Sarah Henderson Trust. Sarah is the sole trustee and beneficiary. She has been the majority owner for the past 4 years. Marcus shot to his feet. This is insane. Mom gasped. Sarah, is this true? I nodded calmly. Yes. Dad asked me to protect the company. So I did. Protect it. Marcus shouted. From who? From you. The conference room erupted. Marcus slammed his hands on the table. This is fraud. Dad was sick. He didn't know what he was doing. I'll contest this in court. Marcus, Mr. Peterson interrupted firmly, your father was fully competent when he executed the trust transfer. I personally handled the documentation. 3 doctors evaluated his mental capacity. The trust is ironclad. But I've been running the company. Marcus's voice cracked with rage and something else, panic. I've grown it by 30%. Actually, I said quietly, you've nearly destroyed it. What? I nodded to Robert Kim, the forensic accountant. He opened his briefcase and removed 2 thick manila envelopes. Over the past 4 years, I said, you've embezzled approximately $362,000 from Henderson Construction. You've also misrepresented company finances to the board, hidden losses from failed projects, and burned through $2.3 million in cash reserves to cover your incompetence. Marcus went pale. That's a lie. Is it? I slid the first envelope across the table. That's the complete forensic accounting report. It documents every fraudulent transaction, every fake vendor, every kickback, every personal expense you charged to the company. Robert Kim spoke for the first time. Mr. Henderson, on page 47, you'll find documentation of payments to Desert Sun Consulting LC, a company registered to your wife. The company provided 0 services to Henderson Construction but received $94,000 in fees. On page 63, you'll find evidence of kickbacks from Bradley Subcontracting in exchange for favorable contract terms. On page. Shut up. Marcus screamed. You have no right to investigate the company finances. Actually, Patricia Chin said calmly from the corner, I hadn't even introduced her yet, but she'd been sitting quietly. As chairman of the Henderson Construction Board, Sarah has every right. I'm Patricia Chin, board member since 2019. This is Frank Rodriguez, also a board member. We've been aware of the trust structure from the beginning. Frank Rodriguez stood up, his weathered face hard. Marcus, I've worked for your father since before you were born. I watched you lie about project cost. I watched you treat good employees like garbage. I watched you nearly destroy a company your father spent 40 years building. Your father knew you couldn't be trusted with full control. That's why he did this. Marcus's hands were shaking. He looked at Mom. Are you hearing this? Are you going to let them do this to me? Mom's face was white. Sarah, your father really did this? His mom. Because Marcus was running the company into the ground while pretending everything was fine. That 30% growth he talks about. Fiction. The company's actual profitability has declined 18% under his management. Another 18 months at this rate and Henderson Construction would be bankrupt. You're lying, Marcus said, but his voice had lost its certainty. I opened the second envelope and removed a document. This is the emergency board resolution we drafted yesterday. It terminates your employment as president of Henderson Construction, effective immediately, pending criminal investigation into financial misconduct. You'll be replaced by Frank Rodriguez as interim president. Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You can't fire me. I'm the president. You're an employee, I said quietly. I'm the owner. I can absolutely fire you. The board voted unanimously. 3-0. Marcus looked around the room wildly, like he was searching for someone to support him. His eyes landed on our aunt and uncle. Uncle Richard looked away. Aunt Linda stared at her hands. Finally, Marcus turned back to me. Dad would never have done this. You manipulated him. You lied to him. Dad did this because he loved the company more than he loved your ego, I said. He knew you were smart and charismatic and hardworking. He also knew you were reckless and arrogant and willing to cut corners. He needed someone who would protect Henderson Construction from your worst impulses. So he chose me. I built that company. Marcus's voice broke. I worked 60-hour weeks. I sacrificed everything. You embezzled from it, I said flatly. That's not sacrifice. That's theft. Robert Kim spoke again. Mr. Henderson, I should inform you that we're legally required to report our findings to the Arizona Attorney General's office. The evidence of financial fraud is substantial enough to warrant criminal prosecution. You should consult with a defense attorney. The room fell completely silent. Marcus stared at me with pure hatred. You're really going to do this? To your own brother? You did this to yourself, I said. I protected the company. I blocked your worst decisions. I kept Dad's legacy alive. And you repaid that by stealing $362,000 and lying about it. Mom, Marcus said desperately, say something. Mom looked torn, her eyes red. Sarah, is all of this true? The embezzlement? His mom. Every word. But he's your brother. Can't you just work this out privately? He stole $350,000, Mom. He falsified financial reports. He took kickbacks. This isn't a family disagreement. This is criminal fraud. Marcus grabbed his suit jacket. I don't have to listen to this. I'm leaving. Before you go, Jennifer Walsh said, speaking for the first time, you should know that we've already notified your bonding company about the findings. Your professional license is likely to be suspended pending investigation. We've also frozen all Henderson Construction accounts you have access to. Your company credit cards have been canceled. And we've filed a civil lawsuit to recover the embezzled funds, which means we've placed liens on your personal assets, including your house and boat. Marcus froze halfway to the door. What? You have 24 hours to respond to the board's termination letter, Jennifer continued calmly. You're required to return all company property, including your laptop, phone, vehicle, and access keys. If you enter Henderson Construction's premises after 5 p.m. today, you'll be arrested for trespassing. Marcus's face went from red to purple. You can't do this to me. We already have, I said. He looked at me with such rage I thought he might actually attack me. David shifted protectively closer to my chair. But Marcus didn't move. He just stood there, shaking with fury and shock and the dawning realization that his entire world had just collapsed. I'll fight this, he said. I'll sue. I'll contest the trust. You'll lose, Patricia Chin said matter-of-factly. The trust is ironclad. The embezzlement evidence is overwhelming. And frankly, Marcus, you're out of money. You've burned through everything you stole. You have approximately $8,000 in your personal accounts. You can't afford the kind of legal team you'd need to fight this. Frank Rodriguez added quietly, your father knew this day would come. He prepared for it. He made sure Sarah had everything she needed to protect the company when you inevitably went too far. Marcus looked at each of us in turn. Then, without another word, he walked out of the conference room. The door slammed behind him. The silence after Marcus left was deafening. Mom sat frozen in her chair, tears streaming down her face. Sarah, how could you do this to your brother? I didn't do this to him, Mom. He did it to himself. For 4 years, I protected Henderson Construction from his worst decisions. I kept Dad's company alive. Marcus repaid that by stealing from the company and lying about its financial health. But he's family. And Dad was family too, I said quietly. Dad built that company from nothing. He employed 42 people who depend on those paychecks. He created something that mattered. Marcus was destroying it for ego and money. I chose to protect Dad's legacy over Marcus's pride. Uncle Richard cleared his throat. Sarah's right, Linda. I've seen the reports Marcus sent to investors. If even half of what that accountant said is true, Marcus committed serious crimes. Aunt Linda looked stricken. But will there be criminal charges? Robert Kim answered. That's up to the Attorney General's office. But yes, with $362,000 in documented fraud, prosecution is likely. Mom stood up unsteadily. I need to go talk to Marcus. I need to. Mom, I said gently, Marcus is an adult. He made his choices. You can't fix this for him. She looked at me with something between grief and anger. You've always been jealous of him. Of his success. This is revenge, isn't it? That hurt more than I expected. No, Mom. This is protection. Protection of Dad's company, his employees, and his legacy. If Marcus had just done his job honestly, none of this would have happened. He'd still be president. But he couldn't help himself. He had to steal. He had to lie. He had to cut corners and take risks that put everything in jeopardy. Mom shook her head and walked out without another word. Uncle Richard and Aunt Linda followed, whispering to each other. When the room finally cleared, it was just me, David, Jennifer, Patricia, Frank, and Mr. Peterson. Frank Rodriguez came over and shook my hand. Your father would be proud, Sarah. This took courage. Patricia Chin nodded. Henderson Construction will survive this. We'll rebuild. We'll restore trust with clients and employees. But it starts with honest leadership. Mr. Peterson began gathering his papers. Sarah, you should prepare for Marcus to make good on his threat to contest the trust. It won't succeed. The documentation is airtight, but it will be unpleasant. I know, I said. Jennifer Walsh added, we'll handle the criminal referral to the AG's office next week. You should also prepare for media attention. Local business press will likely cover this once the story breaks. I nodded tiredly. David put his arm around my shoulders. As we left the conference room, my phone started buzzing. Text messages from family members I barely knew, all asking variations of what happened. And is it true about Marcus? Word was already spreading. 3 weeks later, the Arizona Attorney General's office announced charges against Marcus for embezzlement and fraud. The local business press covered it extensively. Construction executive charged with $362,000 theft from family business. Marcus hired a defense attorney with money borrowed from Mom. His lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the evidence was overwhelming. 6 months later, Marcus pleaded guilty to 3 counts of felony theft and 2 counts of fraudulent schemes. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison with 2 years suspended followed by 5 years of probation. He was also ordered to pay full restitution. His construction license was permanently revoked. Mom didn't speak to me for 8 months. When she finally did, it was a brief, cold phone call asking about the grandchildren. We've rebuilt our relationship slowly, but it's different now. She knows I chose Dad's legacy over her golden child. Some part of her will never fully forgive that. The extended family split. Half sided with Marcus, claiming I was vindictive and power-hungry. The other half quietly acknowledged that Marcus got what he deserved. Uncle Richard actually apologized to me 6 months later, admitting he'd known Marcus was playing fast and loose, but hadn't wanted to believe it was criminal. As for Henderson Construction, we stabilized it within 4 months. Frank Rodriguez took over as president and immediately implemented new financial controls. We brought in an outside auditor. We rebuilt relationships with employees who'd been demoralized by Marcus's leadership. Within a year, Henderson Construction was profitable again. Legitimately profitable. We're growing at a sustainable 8% annually. Employee retention is at an all-time high. We've won 3 industry awards for workplace culture. I remain chairman of the board but stay out of day-to-day operations. That's Frank's domain. I trust him completely. My consulting firm, now part of Meridian Operational Group, continues to thrive. My equity stake is now worth approximately $47 million. I've built something substantial. Something that's mine, not inherited or given but earned. David and I bought a house in Paradise Valley with a view of Camelback Mountain. Our daughter starts kindergarten next year. Our son is learning to walk. Sometimes I drive past Henderson Construction's headquarters and think about Dad. He made a hard choice in 2019, giving control to the daughter who left instead of the son who stayed. He chose competence over loyalty, strategic thinking over ego. It was the right choice. Marcus sends occasional letters from prison. They're mostly angry, still blaming me for ruining his life. I don't respond. There's nothing left to say. He had every opportunity to do the right thing. He chose theft and lies instead. Last month I received a different kind of letter. It was from one of Henderson Construction's longtime employees, a project manager named Teresa who'd worked with Dad for 15 years. "Miss Henderson," she wrote, "I wanted you to know that your father talked about you all the time in those last few years. He was so proud of what you built with your consulting firm. He said you had the business mind he'd always hoped for, but more importantly you had integrity. He knew Marcus didn't. That's why he trusted you with his legacy. Thank you for protecting it. Thank you for protecting all of us." I cried when I read that letter. Because that's what this was always about. Not revenge. Not jealousy. Not sibling rivalry. It was about protecting something that mattered. Something bigger than family politics or hurt feelings. Dad spent 40 years building Henderson Construction. He created jobs. He built buildings that would stand for generations. He earned respect in an industry that doesn't give it easily. And when he knew he was running out of time, he chose to protect that legacy by giving it to someone who would guard it fiercely. Someone who understood that real success isn't measured in ego or applause, but in sustainable value and honest work. Marcus never understood that. He thought success was performance, showmanship, being seen as the winner. I learned something different from Dad, even if he never said it directly. Real success is quiet competence, strategic thinking, and the courage to make hard choices when the easy choice is more popular. At the last board meeting, Frank Rodriguez raised a glass of bourbon in Dad's honor. "To John Henderson," he said, "who knew exactly what he was doing." We all drank to that. Because Dad did know. He knew Marcus would eventually go too far. He knew I was the only one who would stop him. He knew the company needed protection more than his son needed validation. And he trusted me to do what was necessary. I miss him every day. But I know I honored his trust. Henderson Construction is still standing. Still employing 42 families. Still building. That's the legacy that matters. That's what I chose to protect when I walked into that conference room and watched Marcus's world collapse. I wasn't hiding. I was watching. And when the time came, I was ready.